Well, here we are. Welcome to another episode of Color Commentary Live, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. I am your host, Marcus Lloyd, and with me, as always, in the studio, on camera, in the YouTubes, in the Facebooks, here he is, Mr. Antoine Malone. What's happening, Antoine?
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Excited for our conversation today, especially since it's been a week of ranting with my wife about one thing after the other when it comes to the news.
Yes.
So if I'm a little more ranty today, then actually, I guess that would mean I would be less ranty, but I don't know.
Gotten it out of your system.
Yeah, you would think, but maybe not. Maybe it was fuel for the fire. If you
will.
We
hadn't ranted together, so and those rants tend to be worse even than
that's
true than your wife than the Lisa's rant, potentially. I don't know. I hadn't been there when it's just been you and Lisa ranting. It's been, if I've ranted with Lisa around, you've usually been there, and it becomes a collective rant of us and the Lisas. Usually
this is true.
Doing the rant.
This is true. This
Right.
is true. But and hey, welcome.
They get going on that too, so they get.
We could keep going on it. Well, welcome everybody,
yes.
To the show, and make sure you guys. This is a Color Commentary Live. So if you're jumping in on YouTube, we're actually on 3 different channels today. So Color Commentary has a YouTube channel.
Nice.
Threaded, the organization that powers this podcast, it has a YouTube channel as well, and Facebook. Our Facebook Threaded Facebook page is where this will be. So we are simulcasting across all 3 of those. Whichever one you may be listening in on, go ahead and either comment, say hello, or share the link so we can get a few more people in. We love to make this conversation interactive with you guys.
That's absolutely right. This is a chance. We went to this format a couple of months ago, just understanding that, the things that are being talked about out there, we don't have the full measure of all of that. We just don't have the full measure. We want our audience in on this. We want to hear what you guys are talking about. We want to be able to engage, offer any kind of insight that we can give, but also receive the insight from you, our audience. We know that this conversation is not going to be solved by 2 brothers sitting in their studios or out on the streets trying to do work, but it's a collective. It is a group of individuals who desire to see something different happen, who desire to see unity instead of divide, who desire to be truth tellers, who desire to want to create an environment where all people can flourish. They can experience the shalom of God. Those kinds of folks are out there. We know, and so we, as an organization, come alongside those folks and try to guide them and help them and educate and all those kinds of things that come along. Build awareness, build relationships, create collaborative connections, and here on the show to do the same. So these kinds of shows are always better when we have interactions with you. So again, if you are participating, if you're on, man, jump in, put something in the comments, and we can engage from that space right there. Excuse me, too. I got a
little something in your throat there.
In my throat there.
A little,
yeah,
got a little something.
I would say it was the COVID I had last week, but I think it's just a little bit of this soup I was eating right before we got on.
The kova.
Yeah, that's right. But I didn't. We did have the kova at the house at one point, and it was my first time with the kova. The kova is not a great housemate, just is not kind at all. But the first time with the kova, and even when I was over the kova, there's still a little bit of the kova left. I feel it in my chest. Say it with your chest, right?
Say it with your chest.
That's right. That's right. So it's in there. So I'm still a little bit, punchy in the chest. And I will say there's a real fatigue aspect with the COVID as well that just kind of hits you. And I'm not a brother who likes to just be fatigued. So I like to be moving and shaking. And I tried to get in, Antoine, and I know this is exciting for you, for me to talk about. I tried to get in before Christmas to get my booster, and it was like everybody's getting their booster, and I ran out of time. I had to go to Houston and all this stuff, and I came back, and when I got around to doing the booster again, I ended up getting the COVA, and so then you had to wait another 10, 14 days before you can get the booster. So I got the booster 2 days ago, and and I felt miserable yesterday. Like,
After the booster.
yeah,
It's kind of like the flu shot. The flu shot
yeah,
does that sometimes. It like
it
takes you
does.
down.
But I had not done it, and my wife had told, she's like, well, didn't you? Because there was like a trick she had found. She was like, okay, if you drink a lot of water the day before, drink a lot of water on that day, you can kind of push through. But I didn't know that trick. And so she's like, did you do the water thing? I was like, no, I didn't do the water thing. So I was just like
Did you do
the
the
day
water
I
thing?
got the booster, I was literally, I took a nap. And you know me, I'm not a midday napper. But I took a midday nap the day I got the booster, and then woke up feeling ill, knowing I wasn't ill, but feeling
Right,
it.
but just feeling all the
Yeah,
things.
all the things. And so I went through the entire day, and last night it was like 9 o'clock. I was like, I'm out, and went to bed, got a full, 5 to 8, or what was it, 7, I guess, and feel a lot better today. So glad to be in
Okay.
the house.
All
Glad
right. Well, there you go. That's what's up.
that's it. So
Shout out to the COVID survivors.
that's right. Hallelujah. You know what I mean? Let's shout
You
out.
know, surviving is a real thing
It is.
these days.
Yeah,
You know, again,
that's
it is no longer the minimum the the
the
minimum
obligatory
thing to do,
response.
right? It's something to be achieved
That's right.
at this point. Yeah.
That's right. So we praise God for that. I know that that's not been consistent everywhere, but we're glad to have gotten through it this last week. So, and it kind of pulls us into some of the discussion that's even here today. I know that there's lots of things in the news. I don't know about you, Antoine, but I have like an app on my iPad that's got just, it's like a news app. So it's got everything. So you pull it up and it's just got all the different stuff. You can get stuff from anywhere, I'm looking at Apple News, USA Today, Washington Post, NBC News.
Oh yeah, the yellow
It
aggregator thingy.
aggregates all the stuff so that you're kind of looking at all kinds of different articles and the ways and people are talking about those things. And so, this last week, obviously, thinking about even the week before, a lot of the articles that are coming up, right now, people are talking about like the blizzard. Everybody's got the weather
Right.
system that's coming through. But over the last, just kind of thinking of those topics that kind of intersect the place where we engage, Christianity, culture, race. I think one of the topics that was hot definitely last week and still engaging in is this voting rights bill that got kind of pushed down last week.
Yep.
I know going into even Dr. King's birthday, really reading some stuff from his family, there was kind of this challenge to them as the bill was being sort of thought through. There was a challenge from his family, like, hey, this is not a day we celebrate. This is the day we stand in solidarity with the Voting Rights Act, and that we should be, working toward and praying towards the furtherment and the reestablishment of some of the lost tenets of the Voting Rights Act or bill that we lost a couple of years ago. So I don't know. Did you get to see any of that conversation and that engagement around that?
Yeah, I did see a lot of that engagement, and I find myself frustrated with the games that, like, this might maybe it'll be surprising to you, but it feels like even that felt like a game. Like, so
Yeah.
what I did read was like Martin Luther King, Dr. King's holiday. Like, well, we definitely don't want to not pass or not discuss this Voting Rights Act on Dr. King's birthday. And to me, that sounds like gamesmanship. That's like you don't want to pass bad voting laws because they're bad voting laws. I don't care when it is. And
Sure.
and I get it. I get that that it's like, oh, but we can use this Dr. King thing as an occasion to really highlight this. But it still feels like political gamesmanship. And I think I'm just very, very skeptical at the very minimum, but increasingly frustrated at what looks to me like, the sport of politics and how both sides of the aisle try to use different things to advance their causes, as opposed to just being legitimately just about solving that problem. And I'm not saying that the Democratic side, the Democratic voices are not genuinely interested in voting rights, but I'm saying they're playing the game, and
But what if they're not, though? Like, what if they're not? Like, I feel like I know I'm interrupting, but I think that particular phraseology of can we say that nobody seems to be interested in fully solving the problem, right? Like, because I feel like when we want to solve a problem, we solve it. You know what I mean? We couldn't get to space, so we build a rocket.
So we went.
So we went. You know what I mean?
We're like, what? What'd you say? We can't do it?
Right.
Man,
Like, I just don't understand like why some things are so difficult and things that are genuinely like out of this world impossible we can do. Like we've got satellites. I don't even know what the mileage would be, right? But they're not close, and they're just floating further and sending back information. We know what the moon is like. We're sending not beyond the fact that we as a nation decided to go to the moon. We've got private citizens who are building transportation units that are taking people to the moon. Teachers and garbage men are going to the moon right now. I mean, that's not to put them in a category, but folks that don't usually get a lot of investment. And we're sitting here looking at some of the voting issues, and we've got a problem. So,
and we're stuck in semantics, or just politics is the most. It's the most slow-moving, non-productive thing, unless, and this is where cynicism grows, because you look at people who are highly capable of doing things, and then you look at something that they're in charge of that doesn't get things done, and it makes you start to wonder: do they want to not get things done? Like, is that is the goal to actually problem solve, or to keep talking about problems that go unsolved? To continue to keep the problems alive so the conversation can keep going. Because the illusion is maybe it's not an illusion, but the idea is that if you're a politician, you are trying to make society better. That's supposed to be the thing. And I'm sure there's somebody who may have just heard me say that, say, Antoine, you poor boy. Politics, right? Politics is nothing to do actually with making things better. Politics is about being in charge and taking control, to which I would say that's a bastardized, corrupted version of politics that the real.
But this would make more sense to you. What we're seeing now, you'd be like, and just needs to say that so that we don't have these expectations.
Yeah, I mean, just be what it is, because I believe that in a country that's, how old are we, 8 million? I don't know how many people are in America.
A lot.
But it's got to be more than 8 million. I'm tripping. I don't know how many people it is.
It's definitely
8 million. That was dumb.
I don't know. But you're thinking Dallas.
Just Dallas. Yeah. However many it is, there's got to be 50 people out of that number who truly care about making America better. Not protecting America's whatever, some mythological old version, sentimental version of America, but actually see society as something that can be moved forward, that has flaws that can be fixed and move forward. And those are the people who are supposed to be, I said 50, more than 50,
Yeah.
But those are the people who are supposed to be, in the political space, wrestling with what it means to make things better. And instead, it's just this Super Bowl of power that we continue to see over and over and over and over and over and over again, that has absolutely that seems to have very little to do with actually solving problems. Just the problems are just something to leverage power with. And that is very frustrating to me.
Yeah. And when you think about even, this idea, the voting rights bill, and you said this on the show, we've said it, everybody sees it. There are things historically in our country that when we look back on them in hindsight, we just assume those things were bad, right? Let's look at slavery. Slavery, like most of us right now would go, and I say most, would say slavery is a bad thing and we should not do that to people, right? But when they tried to stop slavery, there was a lot of pushback against stopping it. And
Right.
in a war, ultimately, in which 700,000 young men had to go off and give their lives to try to protect the institution of slavery. So
Right.
all of these different, and so you go to that, and then you go to, you go to end of segregation, right? The end of the Jim Crow laws with Brown versus Board of V education, integration. Lots of people against that. Voting rights, civil rights acts in 1964, 1965. People against that, right? There's this push where you go, surely allowing people to have full engagement in the quote unquote American dream inside of this American system should be a no-brainer. And yet there were these people who were against it. So you come to a voting rights bill, and of course, historically with the voting rights bill, it's being put in place because even though I believe the 14th Amendment kind of gave 14th, 15th Amendment gave the rights of basically African Americans to vote, and really anybody, citizens to vote, that they weren't being able to vote in some places because there was all of this obstruction to voting. There were poll taxes that people were putting into place. There was terrorism of those who would vote. If you registered to vote in the South as an African American, even if the district or the place you were voting was 80% Black, they would threaten you with your job and with your life. Fannie Lou Hamer is a great representative of this time period. A lady who ultimately went on with the Freedom Riders and pushing to get voting. And was pulled off a bus, put in prison, and in the prison, the police officers made other Black people beat her until they were exhausted and busted her eye sockets and things of that nature. Anyway, there are these folks who their lives were threatened. She had to leave her home because if she stayed in her home because she registered to vote, she had to leave her kids and her husband on their sharecropping land, because if the people found out she was there, they would kick the whole family out and the family would have no means of income. These are the kinds of things: poll taxes, intimidation, all these different quote unquote tests, literacy tests, just these barriers, kind of redrawing the district lines, all these things, these barriers for people voting. And so we had to put these protections in place where the federal government ultimately said, look, we need to ultimately be overseeing all of the things that you're doing with your voting rights. All the states, all the districts, we need to oversee all of that, because what's happening is some of you guys are doing some stuff you're not supposed to be doing, right? Then we get into the 2010s here and the teens, and we kind of repeal some of that back. We're like, hey, let's take some of that back. Things aren't as bad. It's this post-racial thought process. But then there's different things once we got past the 2020 election, in which we started to see, at least people started grabbing and seeing some different obstacles people were putting into place for people to vote. Hey, we're not going to allow voting on Sunday anymore up until 12. We're not going to make polling places available in these particular neighborhoods, right? We need to see not just an identification of you, but we need to see a driver's license. You know what I mean? These different things, which whenever these kinds of tenets are put in place, they tend to always affect a particular group of people and not affect another particular group of people. When I say that, I'm talking about people of color get to be most drastically affected by some of the things that people are doing, redrawing of the lines, all these things. And so then you get these voting rights acts that are coming in now, and they're like, look, we need to figure out a way to do it. Now, here's what I'm saying. I said all that to say there's huge pushback, obviously, to really making sure the Voters' Right Bill does what it's doing. And part of that is because of power. It is this government, this making sure that the government doesn't have so much power to control states and local places. So that's kind of the ways people talk about it. Is it's not that I don't want people of color to vote. I just don't like the fact that the government would come in and tell me what to do about this and how to run our voting. And so
the same argument, that was the same Civil War argument.
Absolutely.
It's a veiled redirect. But it's not even a redirect. It actually gets to the source. I should be able to discriminate from people, and I don't want I don't want the government to tell me that I can't. I have the right to be a hee-haw if I want to be. You know, there's a Demolition. I don't know if you've watched. Do you remember Demolition Man, the movie?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone. And I always remember there's a line in there that Sylvester Stallone says, "You can't remove Americans' rights to be a-holes," is what he was saying. Right. And I'm like, and when I was younger, again, it's obviously left a mark, but this is basically what it is. Like, hey, government's not going to come and tell me to not have slaves. Who are they to mandate? You know what I mean? Or the government's not going to tell us how to make sure that voting is accessible to every person. The conversation is no longer about voting. It's about you making me do something. And heaven forbid, you know, and I just think it is frustrating.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I see some folks on the chat talking about they need to make voting easier, more ways and places to vote. Partisanship never gets anything done.
Nope.
Right now, it seems like America's political system is set on fighting along party lines, not fixing problems. And yes,
I would say that we have misidentified I agree, Angie. I think we've misidentified the problems. Well, not misidentified. The two parties have decided to go after different problems. One party seems to legitimately care about the broad corporate lifestyle in America.
Corporate, like what do you mean corporate when you say that?
Collective. Maybe I should say collective, because corporate would be. I don't mean corporate America.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for the clarification. But the other has decided that their problem is that the other part, that the party opposite them has too much say. So one party has just decided we're just going to take power.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it seems to me that the Republican Party has decided that the most important thing on their list is that they have power. Then they'll deal with the rest of the problems. But the first thing they need to do is make sure that we're in charge. And it feels to me that that's what it looks like. And so all the moves that are being done seem to be related to the acquisition of power and the protection of them as positive influencers of society. Now, when I say the Republican Party, what I don't mean is that every person who considers themselves a conservative, I'm not talking about necessarily the individuals who I might run into someone who's a Republican. I'm not saying that that's what they think. What I'm saying is, it seems to me that the leadership of the Republican Party predominantly seems most interested in the acquisition of power right now instead of actually solving problems, because I think they feel like the best way to solve problem is for them to be in charge, because they don't trust the problem solving acuity of the other party. So by any means necessary, we need to be in charge. And so now we get these voting laws that, well, let's see how we can create, it feels to me, let's see how we can create these
environments, these
plausibly deniable adjustments based on our perspective of how the system has failed, because the election lacked integrity in their eyes. So let's go and fix these things, but in so doing, let's ensure that we fix the most important problem, which is us not being in power right now. Right. And then and it feels like it's the Republicans' turn to do that right now. And throughout history, I believe it would be true that Democrats and Republicans have played this sort of playbook.
For sure.
Right. That this isn't so much a, one party is absolutely better than the other.
Yeah, that's not one.
Yeah. But at the moment, what it looks like is the Republican Party has an opportunity to pursue this in a different way, and they're falling to the same traditional political tactics of power grabs and using these new ways to try to do that. And as someone who's a Christian, for whom the Republican Party continues to sort of carry the banner of Christianity, I say carry it, if you will. They're carrying a banner with Christ's name on it, call themselves evangelicals. When these things happen, it cast a bad light on Christians and the church, which makes it inherently difficult for me as a young adult minister to talk to other young adults about the gospel while they're watching Christians behave this way, right? And that is where it drives me insane. And so I know I've opened up like 2 or 3 things in all of that. I know I did.
3 things.
I know I opened up like 2 or 3 things in all that, but it's ridiculous that we have this opportunity to pursue social engagement with Christ-like lens and tactics, and we don't use them, but we fall prey to the same power grab tactics of the enemy and of even natural selection of the survival of the fittest kind of mentalities, when we could pursue it in a completely different way. And I actually think that if we pursued it that way, it would be better.
Right.
Certainly better for the kingdom, capital K.
Kingdom, and you could arguably say the country as well.
And the country.
You know what I mean? And I think, to your point, like, everybody's done this over the course of history, this sort of power grab, this sort of thing of, I just need to be in power. I would say that you could probably say, as you're saying, hey, you know, the Republicans are sitting around here and they're saying, we just want to be in power at any means necessary. I think both sides probably do the same. It's just the tactics they use to do it is different, right? I mean, you could look at the Democratic Party historically and even today and go, you know, some of the things that they're doing are virtue signaling. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I'm going to do this very sort of virtuous type of thing. Well, are you doing it because it's really virtuous? Are you doing it because you know that this is the kind of thing that either keeps the people who are with you, and respond and gets those maybe on the middle to kind of come your way? Or do you really think this way? And those are the places that I think this third option of sort of Christians who are sitting in some ways in the middle, not sort of giving them lives to the Republican Party, giving their lives to the Democratic Party. We can sit around and we can start, if I could say, we can start really analyzing it and evaluating it from that Christian lens, as opposed to these very political lenses. And we might be able to actually draw places where people can go beyond this sort of hyper partisanship that you're talking about here, Brian, that we can really get to the place where people can come to the table to actually solve problems. But I think part of the issue too is none of the people that are trying to solve this problem are going to have an issue with any of the bill, right? They're not going to be shut out of the voting rights bill. It's not going to affect.
Doesn't affect them personally.
Personally. So either there's no reason to solve the problem, or there's no reason to work really hard to solve the problem. Right. So if I'm a Republican, I want power, I'm not going to solve the problem of the Voting Rights Act. It's not going to affect me. If I'm a Democrat, it's not going to affect me either. And so I don't know if I really want to work that hard on this problem. I'd rather work hard on a problem that's going to affect me and the people I know and love. And that is sort of that disconnect, I think, that we have in politics from those who are actually, you know, making the rules and engaging, in those who it actually affects. And again, this goes into some of the conversation that we can transition even to, is the idea of diversity amongst that space, right? We know that in the news too, is we've got the Supreme Court justice who just retired. And which is, it's great that he retired, and we're not sitting here going he died, right? Which is the last time we had a Supreme Court justice, is we had the death. And so with this particular thing, we've got the Supreme Court justice, new person who retired. So obviously in the news, everybody moves beyond like, oh, we're so sorry you're leaving, to
no. Right on to the next.
There's not a grief process. There's not. I'm sure of course they're going to do that. You know, they're on nightly.
Sure, there's going to be some Tips treats being delivered to the Supreme Court. Right. Shout out to Tips treats. We need our sponsorship in it. No, just joking.
Absolutely. There's
they don't sponsor us.
Obligatory. We're glad. Sad to see you go. Kind of discussions.
Yeah.
But in the end, everybody's thinking, how do we, to your point, how do we maintain or grab a piece of power, right? If you're a Democrat, you can put one person in there that's going to be a quote unquote Democrat, and you're still not grabbing power. You're just grabbing a piece that hopefully you can add to later. But at the foundation, the problem is, I want to get my person in there so they will do what I want them to do.
Right.
The job of those cats is not to be working in a partisan way. It shouldn't be well, we got to get our guy, our girl in there so that we have a chance to win at the stuff we want to win at. That's the complete opposite of what that particular branch of our government is supposed to be about. And
Right.
so it's kind of frustrating, but I don't see, if I'm in the space, I don't see any other way around it, because everybody else is thinking that, right?
Because everybody's playing the game.
Everybody's playing the game.
Because this is the game.
Yeah.
it's
gamesmanship,
And yeah, it's gamesmanship. But
and so from a diversity standpoint, you've got obviously, President Biden going, I'm going to keep, making a promise, campaign promise of, if he gets a chance to put somebody in the Supreme Court, it's going to be a Black woman. Right. Now, for me, much like in this conversation, probably we'll get to this, because there's an affirmative action.
I'm curious where your thoughts are on this, because I wonder if we're in the same place on this.
I don't know if we're probably not, right? Or we probably are, but not fully. So you've got, because to me, it kind of speaks to the conversation around affirmative action, which ultimately at this point, people are talking a lot about, because the Supreme Court is going to be hearing a couple of cases in October around some things around Harvard and North Carolina, the universities. So, you make this campaign promise, and we talked about this during the election, when he was saying, I'm going to get a Black or a minority running mate. Right. And I think he even said a Black female running mate in the midst of it. So I'm still trying to get all my thoughts on it, but I think there's a part of it that I think about it in the same way that I think about affirmative action. Is I am very I'm very confident that there are minorities, if we'll use that verbiage, people of color, that there are people of color that are female that are very qualified for this job. I'm very confident. And I'm very confident that if you put people of color into positions of power and authority, that they will be successful. It may not be every one of them, but generally, just like if you could call success what we have now, generally, if you put a person who is white in power, they will be successful. Generally, there's people, again, who will not be. But because I believe that all human beings made in the image of God have capacity to be successful, that putting a person of color is not going to be a downgrade. It's going to be a possibility for an upgrade, because of only this, is that for a country that's becoming more and more diverse, the more diverse the perspective is, the more diversity we have from all different levels, whether it be color, socioeconomics, background, history, whatever. The more diversity we put into positions of power, the better we will be able to represent the people who are in our country. And so the assumption is that if you go out and you say, I'm going to find a Black woman, that this person is not going to be qualified. I don't work from that assumption. I believe that person can be qualified. I rebuke the assumption that anytime anybody says they're going to put a person of color in the space, that all of a sudden the idea is, well, you're just hiring somebody who's not qualified. And that same thing is not put when a white person's put in. I rebuke that, right? I refute that. I'm done with it. So I don't mind that, because I think that what we've seen, and I'll use the first class, if you will, Black class at Harvard back in the early 1970s, late 1960s, they put a bunch of folks, because of affirmative action, they just opened up the gate, they left some seats, and you had this first class of African Americans going through Harvard, and a good portion of them have been in the Senate, have been mayor. You got Henry Louis Gates, who's been one of the key pushers for all the things we're learning about African American history, Asian American history, all these different things. When people are given a chance, and particularly when they know they're the first to get in, they come in strong. And so I think that would be a great thing to put in there, and to think very specifically about. I want to put diversity in there that's going to represent the country better, that is qualified. I think that's a fantastic thing. I think it's necessary to do. And this goes to the point where I've said before, to fix inequality, you are going to have to practice inequality, right? If things have been put unequal, then you're going to have to practice a kind of inequality to get to equality. And people, again, will go, that's reverse racism. No, I think it's just allowing people to get opportunities that they never had before. It's not reverse racism. So your thoughts? I know it's probably opposite of that.
Yeah, you're right. Not completely, though. Not completely opposite. I would say I would say that. Okay, so first, I wish Joe Biden would have never said.
Well, no doubt. I mean,
Would have never
that's
made the
plutonic.
promise.
Yeah, we said that when he was talking about.
Yeah, just don't make the promise because I don't. Because it it has the potential to nullify or discredit the qualifications of whoever is selected. It signals that the person's blackness or womanness is a qualifier, and for the role. And there's a discussion that could be had there. What you just articulated is that some sort of these social perspectives come with those categories. You mentioned that, if America is going to be more diverse as a nation, then having a diverse Supreme Court could reflect and help understand the perspectives of the nation and have it, impact decision making. So I suppose the question is kind of in the air. Is woman, or rather is gender or race a qualifier for the Supreme Court? Like, should it be a goal to have a diverse Supreme Court? Now it's not for you to answer quite yet, but if it's not a qualifier,
if you're on the chat, throw it in. Like, should those things? I'd love to see.
Yeah. Tell us what you think about that. But my knee-jerk response to all of it is, I wish Joe Biden hadn't said that.
Sure.
I wish that he would just pick. I wish it was just true that he picked. If a black woman was the best candidate that rose to the top, that he just picked her and say, listen, she beat out this, I looked at 25 people and she was the best candidate for the moment that we're in. And I wish that was the conversation. Unfortunately, the conversation is going to feel like she was, I mean, I can't get around the fact that for you to say I'm going to pick a black woman is a discriminatory statement. And not only does it discriminate against whites, but it also discriminates against Asian, Hispanic, and a whole slew of other people. And so I think it's problematic. And I think the double down is problematic. And I think it starts to feel like the politicking that we were talking about before. It's going to feel more like politicking, more like we're playing games, or like he's playing games, instead of what we would like to believe it to be, which is that he wants real representation, because of how the conversation is being played out. And I worry that that's the case. The second thing, real quick, about affirmative action, I think affirmative action is a kind of reparation, right? So it's a sort of reparation, and I think that that's fine. But I think eventually the reparation has to end. You and I, we always use monopoly. Like, hey, if somebody missed 5 turns, someone else gets to come in and take their 5 turns right in a row. Well, obviously, after those 5 turns, they got to give the dice up, and now they got to fall in line with the rest, with the proper order of things. So reparation has an expiration point, or has a limit. And if affirmative action was a kind of reparation, then the question becomes, when does it end, and what does it look like when it ends? And is what Joe Biden is doing right now by securing a spot for a black woman on the Supreme Court a kind of reparation, or and if it is, is this the last one, or are we going to go back to just fielding resumes and looking and picking the best person out of the resume, period? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's one of the problems of the conversation, is that there is this idea that there is a limit. And I'm not going to say that there's not, but hey, how much is enough? Right. And I think it's way too early to ask that question. You know what I mean? We talk about this in the terms of working with threaded. People will go through a threaded group, and then in week 3, they're going, what's next? And like, it's too early for you to be asking what's next. Like, you've still got a long way to go, right? We've been ultimately, since the beginning of the country, even before, we have been discriminating against people of color in this part of the world for 350 years. And so what you're saying is, hey, since 1968, affirmative action started to come into play, and here we are 50 years later. I think we've had enough. Surely this is enough. It's like, how are you going to undo another 300 years of discrimination in 50 years and then have the nerve to ask the question, do we have enough? Have we done enough? And I'll say it like this, because I of course, what bothers me is that we sit back and we go, it's problematic that Joe Biden would say, I'm going to hire a black woman. And yet we forget that for, again, 200 years of the American actual, experiment of being a country, it was very well known that they were saying, we're going to hire a white man. It was said not only in word, but in body politic. Like there were laws being put in place. There were segregation laws, Jim Crow laws. There were aspects of the Constitution that didn't even give full citizenship to a large portion of the citizenry. Or really,
but we don't. But the thing, I agree. But we don't. But the reason we're talking about those things is that that's what we shouldn't do.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying is like, so we practiced that for X amount of years, 200 years, that we practiced I am specifically going to go after this person. And what we recognize, the reason why we think it's incorrect is underneath that there was this sense of value that was being placed.
Sure.
But also what we're saying is when you just put in white males, you're not truly putting out a representative government of the people that are going to be governed, right? And so what we're doing now is the mentality, right? The motivation of why we're doing it is different. The motivation then was we want to protect white male power, and the symptom or the response, the outcome of that was that we got white male power, and that white women, black men, everybody else didn't get represented. So now the mentality is we recognize we are more diverse. We need a more diverse representation because we believe that's better. So we're actually going to be intentional about trying to put more people who represent more of the citizenry. So the motivation is different. It's not just about maintaining and if I can say it like this, because ultimately the reason why historically we were doing it is because we believed in white supremacy, right? So what this is a nod to a breakdown of that idea of white supremacy to go, hey, you know what? We're going to put other people in here because we recognize that white people aren't the only people who can run this government. Other people can, but if we don't do something intentional, the tenets of white supremacy will continue to boil into the space, and we will be locked up with just the thing we had before.
Yeah.
So I think the motivation.
I understand what you're saying, right? I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, that you have to act intentionally. The word there is intentional. Mm-hmm. The problem is that intentional looks like discrimination. And so out of one side of one's mouth, it's like, we can't have discrimination. But out the other side of the mouth, we're going to intentionally discriminate. And it creates this thing where I think there's a way to act intentionally without signaling discrimination. And the problem is that if you're going to outright say,
but you just said the specific word there, without signaling discrimination.
That's right.
Right, because every decision you make is a discriminatory decision.
Well, not necessarily. If I sit down and I say, hey, I've got, again, it comes down to the question we were asking earlier, and I see there's some people that jumped into the chat, which is representation a goal for a Supreme Court, a Supreme Court council, whatever they're called, whatever the group of it is called, right? Is that part of the job description as a group? If the goal is that, then yes, then now your difference does qualify you on some level because you bring something that needs, the Supreme Court needs, that it's looking for. And in that context, then yes, a black woman is something that's missing there. And therefore, if one has the mentality that's how they're going to build the Supreme Court, then yes, we need to get a black woman, so we found one, right? I'm just not sure that the country sees the goal of the Supreme Court sees representation as a goal of the Supreme Court, and because they don't hold that conviction about that goal, saying I want to put a black woman in sounds like discrimination to everyone who's not black and not woman. You know what I'm saying? Which, I mean, I'm not saying anything that is hard to understand, but I just think there's a difference between, I think for maybe you and I, we see the benefit of diversity on the Supreme Court, and the need, we might articulate it as a need, the need for that to be there. But I think that most people in America don't see that as a need. They would say, who's qualified to be on the Supreme Court? They would just say a bunch of indiscriminate qualifying attributes, law professional, constitution, blah, 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 whatever their career and resume, wherever that would allow them. And I also realize that that qualifier list is built from a kind of white supremacist starting place.
Correct.
But that's because you and I think that way. The broad space.
Well, but you're talking about this broad space of how people think. And I'm not even denying that. I think that's part, if I can say it, it's part of the problem, and part of ultimately what needs to be fixed in this country is this broad thought process of what is the qualifier, what qualifies people, what are the jobs that qualify, what are the things, perhaps. But we're talking about a government and a country that ultimately boasts of being a democracy, a government for the people, by the people. Right. This whole electoral college, the whole representation, right? Like we don't get to vote in the space. I am actually voting for someone to represent me in the space. Right. And so at the very foundation of what democracy, this experiment, is supposed to be, at the very foundation is a kind of representation of the very people in the country. And so if people aren't recognizing the diversity in the country, then maybe they're going, we don't need to be thinking about diversity and representation. But the more we see the diversity, and the more the diversity is growing, and really we've been a diverse-ish country for a while, it's just value-wise who was valued in a way, then it seems like a no-brainer. Again, I know what that sounds like, a no-brainer that you would want in your representative government, you'd want it to look like and represent as best it can, or at least have a tenet of trying to be the best representation of the people at large. To your point, if it's the idea of representation as a value is one that, again, has the tenet of it is in the foundations of the American system, right? Representation. The practice of it has not been good. You get to the 1960s, it's the first time we actually potentially even become a democracy in the sense of, and it was through things like the voting rights in which all people had equal protection under the law to be able to vote without obstacle, right? That's when America was born, it's the 1960s, right? So in the last 50 years of this country's existence, we should be engaging. Newsflash. We should be emphasizing this representation. So what needs to maybe happen is in the job qualifier, and this is what you have to think about if you're working in a corporation, if you're working in a church, an organization. Is there value in diversity, and how hard will you work intentionally to get it? And not just, as you were saying, not just signaling it, but actually doing it. So perhaps in the Supreme Court, we have to put in there a deal is like, hey, this court should be diverse. That way it won't be a problem. Then when you're like, hey, we're going to try to be very diverse about this, then nobody's stressing. Again, I think there's a whole generation of people who is not going to have a problem with this. Unfortunately, or I should say unfortunately, at the current time, these people are not in charge, right? And so the people who are in charge, wanting to maintain power, like we start, they don't want this diversity because that actually goes against this sort of power structure that was built to potentially give them an advantage over others. So it definitely is a
well, I'm just and it's sticky, but we don't want to become the monsters we're fighting against. right? And so we need to be very clear about why, like you've articulated, the reason you believe a black woman or a person of color. Well, let me even broaden it.
Yeah.
The reason you agree with the concept of diversifying the Supreme Court is because it has a practical effect to the quality of the decisions being made there in relationship to the makeup of America, which is one thing. It would be a complete other thing if someone said, we think more black people should be in there because black people should be in there. Just on the merits of their blackness alone, or their womanness alone, which is a different kind of thing. And I think we need to be able to articulate, well, what why we think it is, or at least be ready to answer, if you will, the charge of anti or reverse discrimination, because it certainly looks discriminatory. It's a discriminating statement to say, I'm only going to look at this category of person. That is by definition a discriminatory statement.
Right. And you're doing word therapy here, obviously, right? Which is where people are. You're engaging in the space where people are, they're waiting for it. And I think this is the point you're making, and others probably too, is in this conversation, like I said before, when you're trying to make changes like this, there are going to be large swaths of people who are going to be against you, right? History has taught us that, particularly when you're talking about race change, large swaths. So what you don't do is give them any gimmies. You know what I mean? No gimmies.
Right.
And the gimme
that's
is
kind of where I'm at. And this looks like a gimme.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're like, I said it, I'm going to tell you. And again, and this is the part that's the semantics of it that drives me absolutely nuts. Jesus would say, if you think it, it is. Right. True. So the problem, what we're talking about is that everybody knows he's thinking it, but the fact is that he said it is what makes it a problem, because that is where it becomes a gimme for political gamesmanship to start to play out. And so the gimme is, it just opens up gamesmanship. But at the same time, everybody knows when you do it, there's a good portion that you're doing it intentionally, because historically what it's taught us is most people aren't doing that. So when you put in a black woman, you're making a state, and that's where we are as a country. When you say I'm going to put in a black woman, you're making a statement. Want to be great in however many years when you're putting in a black woman or an Asian woman or a Hispanic woman or whoever that's not a white male, and all of a sudden it's not a statement anymore. It's just kind of, this is how we do it. Yeah. And just to be clear, diversity as a whole is its own kind of space too, because we have diversity on the court already from a racial standpoint.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The key, and this is kind of a place, and Brian Laritz actually has a book on this called Right Color, Wrong Culture. I see Julie was talking about it in the chat. She said, yes, diversity is important. The church should especially see the importance of diversity. Diversity makes things better for everyone. So there's two things what I would say to that is, one, diversity does not make things better for everybody. If you can get so much more done, so much more quickly, if you have people who think exactly the same, right? You're going to be much more efficient that way. Diversity becomes best if everybody in there is a person who is culturally intelligent, right? They know how to engage cross-culturally. They know what to do with that. I think you get a lot more efficiency that way. Also, diversity doesn't necessarily mean that the person who's coming in is going to represent their diversity effectively. So you've got three different versions. You've got kind of the assimilationists, right? And this is where in Brian Laritz's book, he talks about, he uses what's the word? He uses the example of Carlton from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? We remember Carlton, he had the little thing, right? Like he did all that stuff. But the thing in the show is he was so assimilated into whiteness that he at least appeared to have very little to say about the Black experience. So it was great to bring Carlton in there because you got the look of being a Black person in there, but he's basically going to do everything white people do. So that's the assimilations. You don't want that kind of diversity because that doesn't help with bringing the motivation of what we're trying to do, which is this different perspective. And then there's the other extreme, which is, the extreme ethnocentrist, right? So you bring in somebody who's so dug into their ethnicity, let's call it African-American Black ethnicity, that they don't know how to engage cross-culturally, right? They're going to be very much like Pan-Africanism, right? This is where Marcus Garvey and Louis Farrakhan, like those cats on the place, they're going to be so much about being African and doing African-American things that they're not going to be able to play in the soup with everybody else or in the salad with everybody else, better way to say it. So what you're looking for is you're looking for that person who can play it in the middle, who understands the cultural beliefs and the values of the majority of society, but also understands their own culture and can bring a lot into that, and people can engage them from both sides. Denzel Washington is a great example of this, right? Where people on the black side love him and people on the white side love him. He can get in that space. He can probably flash those pearly whites and everybody do what he wants them to do, right? That's the kind of diversity you want. Because we've got, there's Clarence Thomas in there, but Clarence Thomas, people would argue, was so assimilationist that he didn't bring a black perspective in that was very helpful to the majority of Black America, right? So those are the kinds of things we got to keep in front of us when we're talking about diversity and making things better. And the church needs to see that too, that when they bring in diversity, and the people watching the church, when they bring them in, are they bringing in a Carlton, a Farrakhan, or a Denzel? Right, that's what you're looking for from the Black experience. You can look at it.
Yeah, so it's a good distinction. So it's not diverse people per se; it's diverse perspectives that we're pursuing. Correct. I mean, the vehicle typically is people.
Yeah, sure.
Right. But we can't assume in a way that but you can't. Well, we can't assume what as you articulated, that because someone's skin color is one way, that they would be able to articulate the perspective
of that particular
a different perspective than the mainline sort of white American perspective. So perspectives is what we're pursuing. I mean, it's a good conversation, and I wish I was highlighting some of these comments as they were coming through. I was involved in the conversation, and so I didn't highlight. So I'm gonna go back and kind of highlight a few just really quickly. Earlier on, we had Julie mentioned that race, gender is a qualifier. If there's no representation in the court. So she's saying yes, the perspective, someone with alternate or diverse racial or gender perspective, or the perspectives that come from those, should be represented on the court. And in her view, that is a qualifier. And therefore, if it's a qualifier, then it can't be discriminatory. Or at least it takes some air out of discrimination, because it becomes one of many things that you're looking for.
It's less of a gimme when you say we're looking for this.
Yeah, because if you say I'm looking for a law student, then LeBron James is like, so I can't be on the Supreme Court? That's discrimination. You're like, no, actually, these qualifiers, right? Yeah. So it kind of
and if you want the Supreme Court, you want somebody who's got some law experience. You
on the other court, LeBron.
He may be better.
If you go to school and do all the things, then you can get in.
LeBron for mayor, but not necessarily.
I don't want to live in that city.
Okay, all right. So, people around him, he'll be all right.
He may be. I don't know. Actually, anyway, a few other these. Angie, I'm just kind of randomly picking because I haven't read these, so I'm just going to kind of pick some because we didn't do it. I agree that Biden shouldn't lead with the statement. We've kind of talked about that. Carlson believe that's the only reason she is nominated. Yeah, and that's the.
Read it again, because for the people who are going to be.
I'm sorry. I agree that's right. This is not a podcast. I agree that Biden shouldn't lead with that, because it will cause some to believe that it is the only reason she is nominated, which is, Angie said it in a much more succinct way than I probably did when I was talking about it like that. But that is what I was kind of getting at, which is, how the conversation is being had, instead of, it would be so great if no promises were made, and then next thing you know, a Black woman was nominated. I think that just creates a much different kind of conversation than what we're currently having.
She's dealing with the American problem right now, which is everybody deals with the highlights, but they don't, or the headlines, but they don't deal with the paragraphs. Right. So the headline of bringing in a Black woman, that just is just fodder for this, partisan
narrative, this quote unquote woke narrative, blah blah blah.
Well, it just keeps everything going, so it becomes problematic for those particular reasons.
Another one was Andrew wrote, most Americans probably can't tell you who is on SCOTUS currently. Probably right. I don't think I can name everybody.
Sure.
A lot still think RBG was the only female justice, and no, she's absolutely not. The The only female, and there is some pretty good diversity there, but there is not a black woman.
It's true.
It's not all white men for sure.
That's right. That's absolutely
correct. So
so is there an aspect of
you could give the Supreme Court or whatever, however those nominees arrive there, you can give that kind of credit that it does look fairly
That's
diverse.
what I was going to articulate, because I think particularly in this conversation around race and gender and things of that nature, there is this push to be fully represented now, right? Like fully represented now. So if there's places there's like, hey, you're in this race conversation and we don't see Asian women talking in your space. It's like, okay, we're trying to get there. Like, give us a second. We just finally got a black woman in the space. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a little time. No, we need to see it now. If you don't have it now, then we're not with you on that. And when you're talking about the Supreme Court, like, these cats have life appointments.
Yeah.
So whatever, and this is why this is so big, right? Whoever you put in this mug, like, if they're young, they in, unless they retire, like old boy just did this week. So if you're trying to turn over from a diversity standpoint, the Supreme Court, that could take decades to do, decades to make happen. Yeah, and that's just something we have to be. If there's anything, if I'm looking for a grace method here, like, the patience and the grace that we have to be at from an American standpoint to do that is, we just got to do it, because of the way we've set this up, is that, man, we can't make those changes in a year. Now, again, when you start getting to Congress and the Senate and all that kind of stuff, you can do that much faster.
Yeah. That's probably most of the. I mean, I see a few others here, but I think we cover most of the comments with that.
No, that's good.
And we're right at about an hour. We were going to talk about Black History Month, but I don't know how much time we have.
We got some Black History stuff coming. We can go
very soon.
Soon. For those of you who are
not here yet, so
it's not here yet. But here's my encouragement as you go into Black History Month, and we can talk about this more on our Black History show, or if we do one. But Black History Month is not just about figures. Popular figures in Black history. It's about people, right? We tend to highlight the Dr. Kings and the Fannie Lou Hamers and the Ella Bakers and the Frederick Douglasses, these people who kind of become almost the exceptions, if you will, or the exceptional Black people. But what I would like to submit for you guys is that we should be thinking of people as exceptional, as good, as made in the image, as people to be celebrated. The idea of a Black History Month, a Latin American History Month, an Asian American History Month, is, again, not just the people who are at the top, but it's just the fact that the people exist and who they are and what they've been through, particularly in America. As we look at any group that has the sort of or has this sort of hyphen, blank American, if they're not ultimately a white American, which, again, is a homogenous group that has been homogenized from a lot of different groups. If you're looking at some of the people of color, particularly those who have had laws made against them, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Native American, Black, Hispanic, when you're seeing these communities exist, that's something to celebrate. The Black community, the fact that it still exists after all that it's been through, is something to celebrate, right? The fact that there's not these suicides, I'm sure there's trauma and all these different things, is something to celebrate. So if you got a friend who's in the African-American community, like, celebrate them. It doesn't just have to be the top folks that you know about from history. Like, just celebrate that community. The Black community has brought a lot of fantastic things into this space. And again, we'll talk more about it when we probably do a live at the end of this next month. Make sure that you join us for that live at the end of next month. Antoine, you probably have I don't know if I have to.
Yeah, I think the best way, I haven't made the thing yet, but the best way is to just subscribe to whatever you're watching this on right now. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're looking at this on the Colored Commentary YouTube channel, then just hit the subscribe button and hit the notification button that tells you that you can, it'll let you know when we schedule the next conversation. Same thing for the Threaded YouTube channel. Make sure you click it, subscribe there. We do need to, we're still trying to get to 100 subscribers because we would love to be able to just be youtube.com/wearethreaded. And we've got to get 100 subscribers to get there. And we're at about 55 or 56 or something like that. So so we need a good number of you guys. Otherwise, it's youtube.com/whatever, R2H33, blah, blah, whatever it is, right? So, so that's a short-term goal that hopefully we can reach as a community. But more important than that is we want you guys a part of this conversation and enjoyed reading the comments as we were discussing things and get you guys in and talking to each other about things that we're discussing. So make sure that you do those things. And if you're on Facebook, Facebook's a little bit more difficult. I would encourage you to go to the YouTube channel and subscribe over there, mostly because I think it's harder for us to get the news out about Facebook. Real quick thing about Facebook, they just made some changes to our ability to even make ads to Christian organization and social issues demographics. Meaning, even if we were to put money into our ads, Facebook is no longer allowing us to deliver those ads to Christian or social groups. So since we are literally a Christian social group, our ability to even use our money to get the word out about who we are on Facebook is severely hampered as of about 5 weeks ago. And so, if you think what we do is important, then a great way to help us, expand our reach is just to like and subscribe things that we do on Facebook, but also in some of the other spaces, as we are trying to figure out how we're going to make the adjustment, because a lot of what we were doing, have been on Facebook to get word out. And so, so you guys can be helpful in that if you decide to be a part of helping. And again, it's just a matter of liking things that we do and sharing those things and letting YouTube know that is quality content that other people would enjoy.
Yeah.
So simple as that.
So here's a challenge to you guys who are listening. We're going to do our next live show that we know of. Who knows? Sometimes the environment creates a need for us to do it, but definitely our next scheduled live show, February 25th. I want you to bring a friend, but I also, since it's Black History Month, I want you to do some, think about either somebody close to you, maybe an African-American who's close to you that you want to highlight and celebrate that day. Or you can even look for maybe historical figures or current figures in African-American community that you want to highlight. We're going to come in, we'll highlight a few as well. We're going to do we'll do a February Black History Month episode, February 25th. Subscribe so you can hit it, but if not, put it on your calendar and we can come back with that. And for those of you who are in Dallas, we're actually doing a Dallas African-American History Tour. That is on February 19th at 8:30. I think it's 8:30 to 12:30. It's a bus ride. We meet downtown at a spot. We get on a bus with these folks who've taken people on tours for years. They drive us around. We go to all the sites and learn about African-American history in Dallas. So if you have not signed up for that, go to wearethreaded.org. You can sign up right there to get in there. The spaces are limited, so make sure that you jump in there. We don't want you to miss out. It's filling up fast. Make sure you get in on that. And for those of you who are trying to get a bit more learning in this conversation, we have a great class that starts on Monday called Let's Talk Race. It's a Monday class and a Tuesday, and it goes for 5 weeks. It's a great place, particularly if you or somebody you know wants to get in, maybe a little nervous about getting in on a diverse conversation, and they just want to learn a few things, particularly if they come from our white brothers and sisters. This is a class for you. Check that out. It takes on some of the big terminology that people are using right now. I'm really excited for us. It's the first time to do it. Come support and jump in. I know Antoine's going to be in one of those classes. It'll be exciting. You'll be able to see him. But that's happening as well. All you have to do is go to wearethreaded/groups. And then that is where you can find out about that Let's Talk Race class. But man, we thank you guys for showing up and being a part of Colored Commentary. This is a space that, of course, we want to highlight all the different lenses that people look through. the different colorful lenses that they see life. We talk about perspectives, representation. We hope that we can give you a little bit of a taste of what it looks like and what it feels like to look through the different lenses that are out there. And so we say to you, as you start to go out into your area, go out into your world, we want to make sure that you are participating, that you are seeing through different lenses, and that you stay colored.
See you guys later.